What's up, guys? It's your favorite Kiwicoach. Today we're going to be talking about how to match up a bump swing and a rotational swing. Let's go do it. Alright guys, so the first one is the bump swing. So remember, the bump swing is when the hips are moving linear or breaking that wall in transition. Let's go show you what I mean real quick. Alright guys, so the first items of discussion is going to be angle attack. We're going to talk about spin numbers, and we're also going to start talking about how angle attack affects path, okay? So again, as we're swinging up to the top and we're bumping into this wall, what we're doing is we're shifting our center of mass a little bit more in front of the golf ball. Now with most people, when you typically do that, that's going to allow you to hit a little bit more down on the golf ball, right? So basically, the angle that you're creating between the ground and the club head traveling down to the ground is going to be a little bit more acute. So now when we start hitting a little bit more down on the ball, we're also going to be creating a little bit more backspin typically. Now it also depends on loft and strike as well, but typically you're going to see that you start spinning the ball a little bit more. Now second thing to think about is D-plane. So when we hit down on the ball more, we're actually shifting where this club head is traveling a little bit more out to the right. So we might be swinging more right than we typically would want to do, okay? So now let's start talking about how to match it up in terms of now that we know that ball flight terminology. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is the backswing and how we're going to be moving the sternum. So typically you see the great players who bump in transition like such, you're going to see the sternum move off the golf ball a little bit more than someone that's more of a rotational player, okay? Let me show you what I mean. So this alignment stick is going to represent the relationship between the sternum and the pelvis. So most players who bump, you're going to see them actually move a little bit more off the golf ball like such. I'm going to throw this away. It's going to look like this. Okay, so they're shifting their center of mass, or they're shifting their sternum more out towards the outside part of the right foot or the trail foot. Now, once they do that, that sets them up to be able to bump backwards and get that center of mass back down to the golf ball to where it's not too far out in front, okay? So that's the first thing you should be thinking about if you're going to want to bump. Second thing we're going to think about is the downswing and transitional ideas around the pelvis. Let's get into that. All right, guys, so I like to see the pelvis move a certain direction no matter what type of swing characteristics you have. Whether you're a bumper or more so of a rotational swing, I do like to see the pelvis initiate the swing in the same way. And let me show you what I mean. So as we swing up to the top of the swing, we're going to back away from this alignment stick. But as we get up to the top of the swing, no matter what, I want to see the pelvis lowering in transition while you're bumping, okay? No matter what, right? So if you're a rotational swing or if you're a bump swinger, the pelvis needs to be lowering in transition. That's going to allow you to do one of two things. A, it's going to allow you to rotate a little bit more, as well it's going to allow you to shift pressure to the lead side efficiently, which is really important, okay, in terms of strike and low point. All right, so now that we had that, now let's start talking about how the knees are going to start working and how the chest is going to start working. And this is where you're going to see a really big difference between the rotational swing and the bump swing. So let's get to it. All right, guys, so we're going to layer this next clip with a little bit more information about D-plane before we start getting into it, okay? So because we're bumping, we're typically going to have an angle attack that's a little bit more down than you typically would if you weren't to bump. So because of that, now we're pushing our path a little bit more out to the right than we normally do. So most players that I see that bump don't do this next move. I start seeing them messing around with their ball flight laws, and they're not controlling to face the path, which is the sole reason for curvature, correct? So from here, let's start discussing what the knees need to do. So as we swing up to the top, pelvis is lowering, we're bumping into that wall. From here, I like to see the knees start to extend, and I also like to see the chest starting to extend as well. Now, the reason why we're doing that is because it's shallowing out the angle attack, which then means that we're actually shifting path a little bit more left than it would have been if we hadn't have done that. So for a lot of you guys out there that are doing the bump swing, that are hitting a lot of big hooks or big blocks to the right, this little last part that I just talked about in terms of extending the knees and extending the chest is going to help you match up your face to path. Now, if you couple that in with the pelvis lowering, as you extend and as you rotate, now you're going to match up the bump swing, and now you're going to get the most out of that swing that you possibly can. So now you guys understand how to match up the bump swing. Now it's time to start matching up the rotational swing. So let's get into that. All right, guys, so just like the bump swing, we're going to have an alignment stick right here that we're going to draw up straight from the ankle bone. So I'm going to address the ball just like such. Now the main difference between the rotational and the bump swing is with the rotational swing, we're not going to break this barrier until the hands get level to hips. So it's going to look like this. So we're getting around, and once the hands are level to hips, then we're going to see ourselves push that divot forward and break through that wall. And again, it's just a little bit later. So if you guys are under the conception that a rotational swing has no linear movement to it, that is incorrect. There actually is a lot of linear movement. It's just a little bit later than most people, okay? So that's the first thing to wrap your heads around in terms of the rotational swing. So now let's get into kind of some ideas on how to match up this rotational swing and get the most out of it that you possibly can. Let's go do it. All right, guys, so the first most glaring difference between the bump swing and the rotational swing is going to be the pivot. So with the bump swing, we were seeing that the center of mass was moving more so back towards the trail side foot. With the rotational swing, we're going to see a little bit more of a centered pivot. So it's going to look like this. So the relationship between the sternum and the pelvis, you're not going to see it shifting linear that much in the backswing. It's actually going to be a little bit more like this, i.e. called the centered pivot. Now, once we get the backswing dialed in, the downswing is going to be very different as well. I mean, this is obviously probably the most glaring difference, so let's get into it. So as we swing up to the top, just like I explained earlier, instead of bumping early in transition, we're actually going to pressure shift by lowering the pelvis, and we're actually going to get a little bit more rotational and around. Notice how my knees are staying in flexion, chest is more in flexion from here. And then from here, you're going to start seeing the knees extend, the chest extend while you're rotating, and then you're going to break through that wall. And that's going to be how you match up the rotational swing compared to the bump swing, okay? So the reason for this video, guys, is I wanted to kind of show you guys that there's more than one way to swing a golf club. Both ways have worked in the past. Both ways will work in the future. Again, there's no such thing as one is better than the other. There's no actual scientific experiment that is valid under the scientific method to prove that, okay, guys? So wrap your heads around that. Figure out a swing that's most comfortable for you. Match it up by following these guidelines. I hope you guys have a good time out there enjoying the process of becoming a better golfer. Feel free to smash that like button, leave a comment, let me know how I'm doing. Subscribe if you feel like I'm giving you guys value, and yeah, you guys have a good one.